The brave bear who saved her cubs. Have you ever heard a story that is so chillingly powerful? A tale of unadulterated bravery, survival in the face of death, and an unwavering mother's love. Hold on tight, because you are going to hear one of the most incredible survival tales ever told. It involves a brave mother bear fighting a huge predator for the sake of her children. And believe me, you'll remember this one. A mother grizzly traveled with her two small cubs deep in the vast wild tundra of Alaska, where ice rivers chisel through endless woods and the wind speaks of ancient survival. The world was new to them, a playground of soft grass under their little paws, gushing streams and tall trees. They explored, played, and fell without realizing the perils that hid in the shadows. Their mother, however, was wiser. She had witnessed the wild's darker side. She had experienced the winter's hunger, the danger of predators, and the never-ending struggle for existence. She was also aware that her cubs were the most important thing in the world. She would stop at nothing to keep them safe. She had no idea that today would be a challenge, unlike any she had ever encountered. A predator she had never seen before, stronger, more vicious, more determined. This is the tale of an unwavering mother's love, a valiant struggle against insurmountable obstacles, and the bravery that only a mother can muster. A tale that unequivocally demonstrates that love is the most powerful force in the wild. However, what followed would alter everything. A struggle against insurmountable obstacles, a test of survival, and an instance that would demonstrate the unwavering, unbreakable strength of a mother's love. An invisible threat approached as the golden sun sank behind the craggy peaks, casting shadows across the untamed landscape. Unaware of the maelstrom of courage and rage that lay ahead, a larger, more powerful, and more vicious predator set its eyes on the small cubs. The ensuing battle was one of a kind. Every second could make the difference between life and death in this deadly struggle between instinct and power. A mother bear with only one goal in mind: protect them at all costs, stands alone against a power stronger than herself. Would she live? Would her cubs? Or would another life be lost to the harsh, unforgiving laws of the wild? This is more than simply a story, so stick with me through to the very conclusion. It serves as a lesson in courage, selflessness, and unbeatable love. The Alaskan wilderness is a huge, wild place where nature rules supreme, a world unspoiled by time, with their snow-capped peaks standing like ancient guardians over the land. Towering mountains reach forever into the sky. Below, expansive valleys and thick forests of tall pines create a scene so magnificent it nearly seems unreal. With their cold waters glistening under the golden sun, crystal-clear rivers sculpt their way through the rocky landscape, teeming with salmon that jump against the currents to continue their perpetual cycle of life. These rivers are lifelines. The smell of damp ground, wildflowers, and the distant howl of a lone wolf resonating through the trees fill the chilly air. Every species struggles to survive in this vast and merciless paradise. Every day is a struggle between predator and prey, from the silent hunters that lurk in the shadows to the soaring eagles above. A mother bear and her two cubs, who are little, inquisitive, and lively, are wandering around in the middle of everything, oblivious to the danger that lies just beyond the trees. This world is a playground to them. For their mother, however, it's a battleground. She is also aware that there is no assurance of survival in the wild. A mother bear and her two small cubs travel deep in the Alaskan tundra, where rivers gleam like liquid silver and towering mountains kiss the sky. She is powerful, strong, and constantly on guard. To her cubs, however, she's warm, she's secure, she's at home. The infants, who are just a few months old, view the entire world as a playground. In awkward eagerness, they chase each other as they tumble over the dense grass. They climb trees, sometimes too high, paw at butterflies, splash in the chilly river, and scream for their mother when they are unable to descend. She keeps a careful eye on them and never ventures too far. Her eyes are on them at every turn and every stride they take, because danger is always present in the wild, and it will be knocking soon. However, in the wild, innocence is a fleeting state. Although the cubs perceive the world as a playground, their mother is aware that survival is a constant struggle. She pays attention, always. Every sound counts, whether it's the snap of a twig in the underbrush, the distant scream of the wind, or the rustle of the trees, because danger is always present in this harsh wilderness. Predators are hiding in the shadows. Despite its abundance of food, the river conceals dangers beneath its surface, and someone or something might be observing from behind the tall woods, awaiting. The forest's serene rhythm is going to be upended tonight. What about this mother bear? She will soon be put to the ultimate test of her survival. The mother bear guides her cubs toward the river as the sun sets behind the mountains, illuminating the sky with bright orange and gold hues. Their evening meal has arrived. With salmon jumping and their scales shimmering in the last of the light, the river is a hive of activity. She can teach her cubs how to fish here, which is ideal. Her enormous paws dig into the stony riverbed as she enters the chilly water. The cubs observe, their tiny eyes wide with interest. They attempt to mimic her, awkwardly splashing, but they are too little and untrained. She waits still. Then she throws a salmon onto the riverside with a single, strong swipe. It's dinner time. However, she hears it as she turns to see how her cubs are doing. A growl, low and rumbling. It's profound, intestinal, a noise that causes tension to rise in the atmosphere. She raises her head slowly. There is another bear on the opposite side of the river, standing like a shadow in the last of the light. It's not just any bear, though. This grizzly is male. He is also enormous. He's not looking at her, attacking her cubs. Standing on the riverbed, towering, broad-shouldered, and scarred from previous wars, he resembles a living mountain. Years of surviving the harsh outdoors have left his fur thick and matted, making it darker than hers. The earth trembles under his massive paws because of his sheer bulk. One of the most dreaded predators in the wild, the grizzly, is a lone guy. Furthermore, he wasn't a random wanderer. He has a purpose for being here. His calculating dark eyes fix on the cubs. Predator. Sometimes a male grizzly will kill cubs who are not his own in the wild. It's harsh, but that's how nature works. And this man sees an opportunity now. His booming growl reverberates across the air as he advances slowly. A caution, a problem. The mother bear becomes rigid. Her ears prickle. She coils her muscles. She is fully aware of his desires. One thing she is certain of is that he will not get it easily. Cubs may be seriously threatened by male bears, particularly giant grizzlies. However, why? Male bears frequently attack and murder cubs who are not theirs in the wild. And this behavior isn't solely motivated by hostility. It's a vicious reproduction and survival tactic. A male bear can mate with a mother and pass on his genes if he kills cubs, since the mother would soon become fertile again. Survival of the fittest at its most brutal is a cruel aspect of nature. Furthermore, the male bear isn't merely passing by at this precise moment as he fixes his gaze on the cubs. He is calculating. For the mother bear, he sees an opportunity, which means she must fight or her cubs will not live. The ears of the mother bear twitched. Her muscles stiffened. She didn't even need to look to sense it. Low and threatening, a deep, rumbling growl rippled across the air, the sort that silences the forest. The chirping of the birds ceased. The wind seems to pause its breath as well. Then, a silhouette shifted. A huge male bear appeared from the trees across the river, larger than she is, more powerful. His dark, penetrating eyes were fixed on her cubs, and his thick fur bristled. Then he moved forward a step. His paws were rippled by the sea. One more step, nearer. He sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring. He wasn't merely traveling. He had a purpose for being here. With a roar of warning, the mother bear moved to keep her children out of her way. However, the man, he continued to arrive. Another step, then another. The cubs snuggled close as they sensed danger. As they squeezed into their mother's fur, their small bodies shook. Then the male bear let forth another, louder growl, deeper, and he charged this time. The mother bear's thoughts were racing. There was no time for hesitation or for thought. With his enormous body slicing through the river like a natural force, the male grizzly was rapidly approaching. Every snarl shook the air, and every step sent shockwaves through the sea. Her cubs gave little whimpers of fear. Their innocent eyes were wide with fright, and their tiny bodies shook as they clutched to one another. She recognized the danger that they did not. She was also aware of what needed to be done. Her instincts begged her to take action. Run, not possible. Her cubs moved too slowly and were too little. They wouldn't survive. Climb, useless. The male bear had no trouble climbing trees. There was just one choice. She had to struggle. She gave voice to a harsh, guttural growl that shattered the quiet forest like a thunderclap, a caution, a problem. However, the man continued. He continued to arrive. The mother bear turned and pushed her cubs backward into the dense grass, along the riverbed with her strong muzzle. Remain hidden. Remain low. They recognized her intensity, even though they didn't understand what she was saying. Their tiny bodies pressed against the ground as they hunched over. The bear's male was now only a few feet away. His thick fur caused his muscles to ripple. The cold evening air was filled with mist from his labored breathing. He was putting her to the test. Would she give in? Would she flee? Her entire body tensed and prepared. She lowered her stance and bared her teeth. Despite being smaller, she was quicker, more intelligent. Furthermore, she possessed something considerably more potent than physical strength than he did. She had a cause for conflict. Then he lunged. It was all over in a flash. The male bear surged forward, spilling water all around him. His teeth gleamed in the last of the sunshine as his claws cut through the air. The mother bear, however, was prepared. She snarled fiercely and confronted him directly. It was an earth-shaking impact, a clash between strength, rage, and survival instinct. Standing at full height and rearing up on their hind legs, they engaged in a lethal conflict. She avoided the male's initial swipe, which saw his claws slicing through the air. He swung once more, tearing through skin and hair as he grazed her shoulder. She felt a surge of pain, yet she remained unflinching. She was unable to. Rather, she struck back. She sprang forward with rapid speed, her teeth digging into his shoulder, a deep bite that crushed bones. The guy twisted violently to shake her off, roaring in anguish. For a minute, the world around them blurred. Beneath their feet, the river roiled. Treetops were dotted with birds. As they saw their mother fight a monster, the cubs remained motionless in the grass, their eyes wide. She almost fell into the river when the male bear pushed her back, but she managed to catch herself in time. This has to stop. She also needed to finish it quickly, because her cubs wouldn't live if she didn't. Tension permeated the air. Tensed muscles, the mother bear held her ground, prepared for whatever was about to happen. The bear did not immediately lunge. He was putting her to the test. His deep, steady growl echoed through the land like distant thunder, so low and frightening. It wasn't merely a caution, it was difficult. Then he stepped forward. With a splash, his huge paw hit the water, causing waves to spread outward. One more step, nearer. His black eyes met hers as he studied her, watching for a reaction. However, she didn't. The mother bear's snarl was strong and harsh, sending the unmistakable message, Stay. Back. After a moment of hesitation, the man moved forward once more, intentional, slow, taunting. In an attempt to push her as far as possible before she broke, he was doing so. To put herself squarely between him and her pups, the mother bear moved, her ears flattened back as she dropped her head, ready, her claws flexed. The cubs' tiny bodies shook as they pressed deeper into the grass, feeling the increasing danger. There was no sound from them. This was serious, they knew. Once more the male gave a louder growl. His muscles stiffened, and his breath was heated. Then he took a step again. The bear's mother was aware. He had no intention of stopping. It dawned on her then that the battle had already started. Then it did. The male bear's entire body stiffened in an instant, his muscles coiling like a spring. His target was fixed by his black gaze, and then he charged, his roar deafening. All around them, the world seemed to blow up. His enormous paws caused the ground to quake, and every step sent shockwaves across the ground. He roared through the water, sending waves crashing on the shore, causing the river, which had been serene and shimmering in the last of the sunlight, to erupt into mayhem. Crash, splash, drops of water blasted skyward, glinting like broken glass in the final rays of the day. Fish fled in terror at the ferocity of his charge, vanishing beneath the surface. His deep, rumbling roar ripped across the valley, reverberating off the cliffs and reverberating into the vast wilderness, causing the trees along the riverside to tremble. He was on his way, and he was approaching quickly. The cubs' little hearts pounded against their delicate ribs as they whimpered in fear and ducked farther into the grass. They knew that something horrible was going to happen, even if they didn't fully comprehend the risk. The mother bear breathed sharply and quickly. She was running out of time. No more cautions. It was this. She roared forward, a flurry of muscle, rage and instinct that could not be stopped. The struggle to survive had started. The impact was like thunder roaring across the valley. With earth-shaking force, the male bear and mother bear collided as they faced each other head-on. Around them, water burst, causing the river to ripple violently. A deep, guttural sound, the sound of unadulterated strength, of survival at its most brutal, was thrown through the air by the hit. Towering over her, the male bear growled and sprang up on his hind legs. His long, sharp, deadly claws flashed. With all his strength, he swung toward her head, but she ducked just in time, allowing his claws to graze her fur. She immediately retorted. Her claws tore through the thick fur and skin of his chest with a strong swipe. The river became a battlefield as blood flew into the air and mixed with the water. However, the man refused to give up. His teeth were exposed as he rushed, his jaws snapping. He made a deadly move, aiming for her throat. It would be over in a matter of seconds if he managed to grab her neck, but instead his teeth dug into her shoulder as she spun as quickly as lightning. She didn't scream, even though the pain tore through her body like fire. She was unable to. She refused, because she still had her cubs behind her, observing, awaiting, relying on her. Driven by sheer determination, she let out a shout and threw herself forward with all her might. Rolling in a whirl of fur, claws, and snapping jaws, they collided with the riverbed. Under them, the ground shook. Their battle sent shockwaves through the forest, causing the trees to tremble. The sky was filled with the frantic screams of scattered birds. The male bear pressed his enormous weight against her, pinning her down. His power was indisputable, and his breath was heated. It appeared for a moment that she would lose. Her entire body hurt. Her fur was soaked with blood. This was the strongest opponent she had ever fought. Then, a small, frantic sound, a scream, her young. Their terrified whimpers cut right through her suffering and tiredness. She was necessary to them, and she felt something break inside of her. She wouldn't lose. She was unable to lose. She turned beneath the man with a quick, explosive surge of strength, kicking him off with her strong legs. He was taken by surprise and staggered. It was her opportunity. She snarled in rage and rushed once more, digging her fangs into his shoulder. She would not let go, even while the male bear thrashed wildly and shouted in pain. She shook her head and gripped down harder, ripping through flesh and muscle. She was now winning, instead of merely fighting. With a howl, the male bear withdrew and staggered. His eyes flashed with uncertainty for the first time. It dawned on him then that this was not worth it. He turned with a final growl of rage. His wounds were dripping blood, and he retreated, defeated. Then he vanished into the forest without another word. The conflict was over. The mother bear, though, she remained upright. Her body burned with pain, yet she persisted. She was unable to. The male bear was built for dominance and was heavier and stronger. However, she was bred for something more: survival, protection, and the unwavering instinct to protect her young at all costs. With her teeth bared and her claws cutting through the air with lethal accuracy, she lunged once again. The male let forth a frustrated growl. He had anticipated her breaking and giving up. However, she didn't. She battled like a possessed animal. His enormous weight slammed into her side as he raced at her, almost throwing her off balance. But instead of falling, she sunk her nails into the ground. She swiped again. This time she hit his face, cutting his muzzle with deep, scarlet scratches. As blood trickled from his wounds, he snarled in rage and shook his head, but his anger was only heightened by the pain. He attacked with scary speed, his strong teeth aimed for her throat. It would end if he managed to grab her neck, but she twisted at the last second. Instead, his razor-sharp fangs scratched across her shoulder, causing her body to ache once more. However, she countered his motion. She struck again before he could recover, aiming low this time. Her nails tore into flesh as they swept across his back leg. He staggered and roared in rage. He was unsteady for the first time, and she noticed her gap. Jaws wide, she rushed forward with all the strength she possessed and clamped down on his throat. She held on with relentless power as the male thrashed violently, attempting to shrug her off. Even though her wounds hurt and her muscles burned, she wouldn't let go. Because dominance wasn't the point of this struggle. It was a matter of survival. With their small eyes wide with terror, the cubs huddled together and watched. She was unable to lose. The male bear staggered and moaned. His movements slowed for the first time. His body was deteriorating, and his breathing was labored. Then he decided something. He gave one more growl of frustration, wrenched himself free, and staggered back. His eyes, which had previously been aggressive, now wavered with doubt. He had misjudged her, and now this fight wasn't worth it, he knew. He turned slowly. Then he vanished into the forest's shadows, disappearing into the woods with a deep, defeated huff. Even though her body hurt and her breath was labored, the mother bear continued to stand, and the cubs behind her. They remained secure. The male bear attacked the mother bear once more, before she had a chance to catch her breath. She wasn't quick enough this time. His claws ripped deep into her thick fur, tearing into her side in a vicious swipe. Sharp burning pain blazed through her like fire. Blood dripped into the water, turning it red as she stumbled and almost fell into the river. The grizzly male saw his advantage. With a snarling roar, he advanced to make the kill. She wasn't finished, though. It didn't matter how painful it was. The injury was irrelevant. The two small cubs behind her, cowering in the grass and waiting for her to triumph, were all that mattered. She resisted falling. She gritted her teeth and pressed her claws into the ground, forcing herself to stand despite the pain. She was worn out and wounded, but she wasn't broken. She roared loud and earth-shakingly and threw herself back into the fray. The man paused only a moment. She only needed a second. With a sudden surge of vigor, she struck out, Using all of her remaining strength to slam into his side, he stumbled back, unprepared. She was hurt. She was wounded. She continued to fight. Nevertheless, she was also not going to stop. Not right now. Never. The toll of the fight was high. Her entire body hurt. Her injuries were burning. The weight of each breath increased. The mother bear hesitated for a time. The male grizzly was unrelenting and vicious in his attacks. He was bigger and stronger than she had ever been, yet she had fought harder than before. Then, amid the confusion, a noise, little screams of desperation. Her young, their tiny voices echoed from their shaky huddle in the grass. A call, a plea, a desperate "Mama," in the only manner they knew how, and everything changed at that instant. She felt a fire ignite inside of her. The fatigue, lost. The suffering is irrelevant. She was now protecting, rather than merely attacking. She was defending. She stood between death and life. With fresh rage, she threw herself at the guy with a yell that rocked the ground. Quicker and more powerful. Unstoppable. It was too late for the male to respond. Everything that remained of her was struck. Her claws swept across his face in a vicious sweep, a strong shove. He lost his footing and staggered. With one last roar that rocked the earth, she charged, now bleeding, stunned, and outmuscled by her sheer willpower. The male bear retreated a step, then another. His deep growls became unsure. He had misjudged her. He realized now that this battle had ended. He gave one final stare before turning and fading into the shadows and trees. The conflict was resolved. What about the mother bear? She was triumphant. Her spirit was damaged, but her body unbreakable. She walked carefully in their direction and turned back to her cubs. With their small bodies pressed against her fur, they raced to her and nuzzled her as though to say, "You did it." With a low, comforting rumble, she dropped her head and breathed in their familiar aroma. They were secure since she had engaged in combat. Since she had persisted in trying, because the most powerful force in nature is the love of a mother. The mother bear sensed that the fight was coming to an end. Even though her body hurt and her wounds burned, she refused to give up. Not right now, never. Despite his strength, the male bear was slowing. He was breathing more deeply. He was now paying the price for underestimating her. She recognized her opportunity. She charged forward. One last blow. One last, conclusive blow, with all the vigor she had left. Her strong claws slashed through the air and struck the bear's face from the side. His muzzle was cut deep and sharply, and blood spattered onto the rocks below. He staggered backward and yelled in agony. As he tried to get his bearings, the ground shook beneath him. However, he had lost his confidence this time. His loud growls became quiet huffs of uncertainty. His position of dominance and ferocity waned. He shook his head and blinked, seemingly comprehending for the first time that he wasn't the predator in this situation. Her breathing was steady, but heavy as she stood straight. She remained resolute and fought, and he was defeated. The man retreated a step, then another, his nostrils swelling. He gave a loud huff as though he was thinking of making one last try. The mother bear, however, remained still. She was not required to. "Come any closer, and you won't leave in one piece," was her unambiguous message. The man paused a second longer, and then he turned. He limped away, withdrawing into the shadows of the trees. As he vanished into the forest, his huge paws made deep impressions on the damp ground. It was over in an instant. The mother bear remained motionless, observing until the final sound of leaves rustling was replaced by quiet. Then she let out a breath, a deep, lengthy breath. She had prevailed. She had accomplished her goal. Her cubs were secure. The male bear reeled from the intensity of her last stroke. The wet, uneven ground caused his huge body to lurch sideways, paws fumbling for balance. He appeared wobbly for the first time during the bout, not sure. His face was covered with fresh wounds, and blood trickled down and mixed with the cool water. He remained still, contemplating, his chest rising and falling as his heavy breaths came in ragged huffs. Was it worth the fight? He stood there, still glaring, still poised to attack, his dark eyes darting toward the mother bear. She hadn't given up despite her wounds and the fatigue that was weighing on her. She would never. Something changed in the male at that very moment. She would not shatter. She wasn't the prey. She wasn't frail. He was powerless against her. He shook his head, flicked blood from his snout, and growled deep and angry. Then he stepped back gently, and yet another. With his nostrils flaring, the male grizzly gave a loud huff, as though he was still considering his options. But he knew in his heart that he had lost. He turned and gave one last glance. His enormous body vanished into the thick woodland, engulfed by the darkness. The battle was over. The mother bear's heart remained strong despite her gasping and aching wounds. She had prevailed. Her cubs were still alive, tucked away in the grass behind her. The male bear gazed at the mother bear while taking a final deep breath and opening his nostrils. His pride was crushed, his wounds ached, and his body was damaged. It was not worth the fight. He turned away with one last low growl, not of triumph, but of frustration. His once dominant posture was now burdened by fatigue and defeat as he struggled toward the tree line, his enormous paws thudding against the damp earth. At the edge of the woodland, he paused for a second and looked over his shoulder one final time. The mother bear's sharp eyes were fixed on him as she stood erect and unflinching. She didn't flinch or move. She challenged him to try again after she had fought, and prevailed. However, he refused. Now he was aware. He vanished into the thick tree shadows without making any sound. As he ventured farther into the wilderness, his labored breathing faded into the darkness as the underbrush rustled. Then there was quiet. He had left, defeated. There was silence in the jungle. The mother bear stood motionless, her chest rising and falling with labored breaths. But the battle was finished. Her entire body hurt. The cold night air made fresh wounds sting. Her fur was matted with blood, but her soul not broken. She turned slowly, looking over the dense grass where her cubs had taken refuge. Nothing for a moment. Then there were little rustling noises. Two tiny quivering forms appeared, staring at her with wide, naive eyes. They had seen it all. As though uncertain, they paused. Was it secure? Had their mother prevailed? She gave a deep, low huff, a sound of contentment, a sound of certainty. They only required that. With their small paws digging into the wet ground, the cubs sprinted at her, as if to confirm that she was real and still standing. They nuzzled into her legs and rubbed their tiny heads against her fur. She put her enormous head down and rubbed her nose against them, taking in their well-known aroma. They were secure. It was her. She started guiding them farther into the woodland shelter and away from the battlefield with cautious, methodical steps. Even though her body hurt and her steps were heavy, she continued. Mothers never stop, with their small bodies clinging to her side. The cubs followed closely, learning how to survive and what it meant to be strong. And the river behind them calmed as they vanished into the dense forest. The trees remained still. The battle was over. She had struggled. She had prevailed. She would now continue, for the love of a mother is the most powerful force in nature. The mother bear finally permitted herself to relax as she made her home in a tiny clearing far into the forest. Even though her wounds throbbed and her body hurt, it didn't matter anymore. The threat was over. She had prevailed. Still in shock from what they had seen, her cubs remained near her. They simply rubbed themselves against her, their little bodies shivering and warm, without playing or wandering, yet rushing from the panic, yet uncertain. She could feel their tiny hearts thumping. That's what any mother would do, to protect them from the chilly night air. She cuddled up about them and covered them with her thick fur. Just having her around gave them a sense of security. One cub gave a little sigh of exhaustion. With its eyes fluttering shut, the other tucked its head into her. They were at home. The mother bear, damaged but unbeaten, remained awake, her ears listening for any sound or threat. as the wind whispered through the trees and the stars' sky sparkled softly. But the woodland was quiet for the moment. The only place her cubs ever needed to be was right next to her, and in this peaceful moment they slept blissfully, safely, and protectedly. The mother bear stood up as the first rays of dawn illuminated the sky in gentle pink and orange tones. Her wounds pained, and her body hurt, but she had no time to relax. Although the battle was ended, life continued. She gently urged her cubs to stand up. They clung to the warmth of the night as they stretched their small legs and blinked up at her. For the time being, they were safe, but not here. Once their home, this location was now a battleground. The churned dirt served as a reminder of the peril that had almost claimed them, and the smell of blood was still present in the air. She couldn't afford to stay. She huffed softly and turned, moving forward into the thick woodland with her cubs at her heels. She took deliberate action at every turn. Careful ears and keen eyes listened to every rustling leaf and every snapping twig. She was aware that there might be greater threats in the wilderness, but she also knew that her cubs would be safe. The trees grew denser as they went more into the forest, their soaring trunks hiding them from view. The promise of a fresh start, wet earth, and fresh pine were among the new scents delivered by the breeze. Her young cubs followed without inquiry, oblivious to the fact that they had nearly lost everything. Thus they didn't have to inquire. She was theirs, and they would always be protected as long as they did. This was more than just a survival struggle. It was evidence of something much more significant, the strength of a mother's love. Strength in the outdoors is more than just size or strength. The purpose is key. The mother bear had nothing to prove and didn't fight because she wanted to. There was nothing else she could do but fight, because she valued her cubs' safety more than her own life. The fearlessness, tenacity, and unbreakability of a mother's love are what gives it its immense strength. Furthermore, it's not only true in the wild. Every mother who spends the entire night at the bedside of her ailing kid possesses it. Every woman who puts her children first defends them and battles for them at all costs, for in the end, no instinct or force is more potent than a mother's affection. What about this mother bear? With each claw mark, each wound, and each remaining ounce of strength, she demonstrated that. She struggled. She prevailed. Her cubs will live to see another day because of her. There is more to this tale than a bear. It's about having guts. It involves making a sacrifice. It's about the real meaning of protecting the people you care about. Standing your ground when running seems simpler is an example of courage, not merely facing danger. It's persevering in the face of adversity. There was every incentive for that mother bear to retreat. She was smaller, she was less strong, she was hurt. However, none of that was important. Her cubs were what counted, and for that reason, sacrifice has such power. Giving everything you have with no expectation of anything in return is a true sacrifice, even if it means losing everything. It's about safeguarding and making sure that someone else lives. It's not about winning. Everywhere this motif recurs. Outside, in the past, in our personal life, to save a stranger, the firefighter dashes into a burning building. In combat, it is the soldier who protects a friend. It's the parent who sacrifices their goals and works non-stop so their kids can pursue theirs, because love does just that. It engages in combat. It makes a sacrifice. It never stops. What about this mother bear? She was more than a fighter. She represented everything that made bravery and selflessness the most potent forces in the universe. Please take a moment to click the like button if this story touched you or made you feel something. People who enjoy strong, true-to-life tales of bravery and survival will be able to read more stories like this one. Additionally, be sure to subscribe and enable notifications if you would like to hear more amazing tales from the outdoors, because you won't want to miss any of the unvarnished, motivational, and fascinating tales found in nature. Please share your thoughts on the strength of a mother's love in the comments section as well. Have you ever witnessed a remarkable animal's ability to defend its young? Leave a comment below and let's discuss it. Keep inspired, keep inquisitive, and never undervalue the power of love. Until the next time.